Good morning. Good morning. It's Wednesday Wisdom, and I'm here with the beautiful Rachel. And for those watching live, good morning. For those watching the replay, please put a hashtag and let us know that you're there, and just tag us in and ask any questions or comments will be great. And anyone that's watching on YouTube, hi, how you going? So, Rachel, we're talking about a really sensitive topic today. I actually go into my calendar of a morning and see who it is that I'm talking to on a Wednesday, and I was taken aback. Actually, is like, oh wow, this is going to be a big conversation, right? Because grief is such a big process. So
yeah, it is a big process, and it can be a big conversation. But it can, I think, like everything, grief as a journey has its dark and its light moments, and it doesn't have to be this weight. So hopefully I can share some tips and tools that I've used from my tool belt over the years to get through something that's really difficult. So hopefully it's helpful.
Yeah,
more than anything.
I'm sure it will be, because I remember, before we jump into what we're actually talking about, I remember a psychologist friend of mine way back up in far north Queensland, beautiful, beautiful woman. And funnily enough, I'll tell you a moment about her that's relating to you. And she had a little booklet about grief. And she was saying to me, we had a discussion about how the grieving process is the same sort of stages, really, but you can go from like any death of one thing into the rebirth or a new pattern has a moment of grief, and it can be a split second where we're not even aware of it.
Yes.
Or a long process because it's a deep experience that we're having. And so from changing houses to like having a child, like all of the different stages that go.
Yes.
When we let go of one stage, there's this split second potentially, but sometimes a little bit longer, of this process that happens, and so do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, so I completely agree with that. I think I can relate to that so deeply, because even though I kind of experienced what most people would agree is the worst loss, there's periods of time in my life where grief has shown up in different forms and shapes, and I may not have been aware of it until the moment I lost my son Hamish in 2012. He was 20 and a half months old, and he passed away at home in an accident. It was very traumatic, as you can imagine. And I have 3 other children at the time. I now have another little boy, Finn, who has been born since Hamish passed away. And really, I had no. It had never crossed my mind that anything would ever happen like that to me. Like, I lived in a first world. I could feed my children. I could look after them. I could cross the street, hold their hands when they cross the street. It was such a huge, and there are actually no words for that feeling. I don't feel that kind of deep divide that then you feel like you've just been split in two. And I remember
I was ripped apart. Yeah, yes, that was what the words were coming to me. Yeah,
it felt like I was being ripped apart. And I remember saying to my husband at the time, we were in hospital with Hamish, and we knew that he wasn't going to make it. And I remember saying to him, how do we go on? Like, I don't know how we're going to do that. And he just looked at me and said, we have no choice. We have to honor our son, and we have to love our children, and we have to love each other, and we have to get through it. Sorry, it makes me teary just even saying those words again. Yeah. But and that's what we've done for the last 9 years. And it hasn't been easy. There are some pretty major troughs and there have been times when it has been really difficult, and I've needed him and he's needed me, and we've had to dig each other out of some pretty major holes. But we have beautiful children to love. And as you know, when you lose someone, that person isn't gone, they're there.
Yeah.
Their relationship just changes.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I guess, I need to remind myself of that, because there are days when I just feel that immense missing.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself he's still there. I just,
Yeah.
just different, and I know he's okay, and I know he's fine. And so yeah, it's just a life. I really truly believe it's a lifelong journey. The tropes that get said to you along the way, like time heals, and everything will be fine, and and all the things that people say to you with beautiful and good intent.
I know, and you just sort of look at them and smile and think,
yes,
you got no idea.
No,
yeah.
And you know what? It never goes away. It never gets better. But I think what happens is your brain gets better at compartmentalizing it, and you live around it, and you live through it, and it never leaves you.
And sorry to interrupt, but you grow from it in your own, like it births something else, like my dad died when I was 15, and so like that experience moved me into spirituality, so there's so much.
Yeah, I completely
Most probably
agree.
the same for you. Yeah,
it did. And that was always probably there.
Yeah,
I'd probably forgotten it
me too.
I think I'd probably forgotten it for quite a while, in a few years, and hadn't really explored it like I did after Hamish passed. I think it became a really big, important part of my life after that, because you're a mother and you never stop being a mother. And I wanted to know that my son was okay, and so, definitely more exploration happened after he passed. But yeah, I think it's, sorry, Elizabeth.
No, well, I was just going to say, can I ask you, so you before we got on, you said that you have just recently been to Brisbane Hospital to do some processes on grieving. Were you already in that field, or this moved you? This
yes,
birthed that, right?
It really did, yes. I guess what happened after that is I wrote a blog for a while called Mummy Muddles, and I blogged a lot, and through that blog I became known. It got a bit frightening for me. There was a few people who weren't very kind, and I ended up stopping that. But people know of Finn's Feather as well, the book that I wrote about grief for children, following that as well, because you feel like you have. Yes, sorry, this is.
And just to add that bit, that woman that I just told you about, my friend that was a psychologist.
Yeah.
She had a thing about white feathers, and her little book had a white feather on it.
Yes, well,
the one about grief. So
it's an interesting story, because I really wanted to write a book about grief, and obviously that's at the time it's such a momentous thing to try and achieve, actually, because for children it can be, it can be difficult as an adult trying to write a book about grief for a child, not knowing their background or religious beliefs or cultural. So it was a challenge, and I wrote a number of stories before the story of Finn's Feather came to me in the car one day. I was driving my daughter home from netball, and the whole idea came into my head. And when I got home, I saw a white feather on the doorstep, and I knew that was the story. I knew that that was the story, and I had to make it happen. I didn't know how. I didn't know very much about publishing at that point, and I just knew that I would not stop until I did it. And I don't think I've ever felt about it like that about anything else in my life. That urge to do something so profoundly. And so I did. I was published in the US in 2018 by a publisher called Enchanted Lion, and that all happened very weirdly as well. I sent this publisher a message via Facebook Messenger, at the time it was new. Facebook Messenger was new, and I guess there was no real etiquette around how you were supposed to use it. And I was really cheeky and just sort of sent this publisher a note that she said to me she had never accepted anything via Messenger before, and she never would again. But I must have just chosen the right place at the right time. And she said, "Oh, look, this sounds really interesting. Could you send me the manuscript?" Which I did. And then I think everything in publishing, as you know, takes months and months and years. And I think it was like maybe 5 months later, she sent me a message to say that she loved the manuscript and she'd like to buy it. So, and that's how Finn's Feather was
created
born.
and
Yeah,
birthed.
yeah. So, and then I think from that, I sent that to places that I hoped that it would be of benefit. And one of those was the bereavement service at the Children's Hospital in Brisbane. And I would chat with the bereavement officers there who are amazing. They are just phenomenal. And then one day they asked me to be part of a series called Good Grief, This Hurts. And it was just a seminar for professionals, for parents, for anyone who work with bereaved parents and children. So I became part of that series last year. And I'm not qualified. I guess I'm not qualified for that. I'm a journalist and radio producer by trade, if you call it that. And
I question things like that, like because you can go and get a qualification and get a certification, like a little piece of paper that says I've learned all this stuff. But personally, I think life experience gives you a hell of a lot more than or should I say, if you process it and work through it and get to the other side of a process, then like you can then go and reverse engineer the process and support others to go through.
If you gain some insight through the process and you feel like that insight may be able to help someone else, I guess. Yeah, that's how I feel. I just sort of I've gained some insights over the years, and I feel, well, maybe if that even helps one person, I kind of have an obligation to share that. And I was on that panel with professionals, so I didn't feel like I was giving professional advice in that capacity. I was actually giving capacity as a bereaved parent, which everyone was respectful of. So it wasn't just like, oh, you're trying to talk about something that you're not qualified in. Well, as a bereaved parent, I'm pretty qualified.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. And so have you got any tips for anyone that may, we've got lots going on in this world at the moment, right? And so, for anyone that may be going through the grieving process, what would you suggest? What are your tips?
If you're in those early stages, it really is one breath at a time. Someone gave me a little card when Hamish died that said one breath at a time, and I think that I really relied on that in the early days, because one thing I did also notice too when is I actually had trouble breathing. I would find that I would hold my breath for really long periods of time, and suddenly I'd find myself gasping. And so literally one breath, breathe, keep breathing. And then it's like 1 hour at a time and half a day at a time, and then a day, and you build it up, and you're like, suddenly you got through an entire day, and it's it feels like an achievement, and it is like, there's just, don't allow yourself to do whatever you need to do, whatever your body needs to do. Don't listen to what someone else tells you what stage you should be at or what you should be doing at that particular point. Just listen to yourself, listen to your body, and take care of yourself in the best way you know how, and ask for help if you need to. I was very lucky. I had swarms of people who delivered food to my house and helped me take care of my kids, and I had people who'd come and just take out my rubbish and just stuff like that. It just made such a difference, and you almost feel like you're being lifted, and that kind of assistance also allows you to have some space to grieve. So I mean, it's not an easy journey. There's many backward steps before you take, sometimes I felt 3 steps forward, 4 steps back. Some days it was 2, but that's all part of it, and be kind to yourself,
It's a big one, isn't it? Because so many people, especially us women who are always serving and loving and nurturing everyone else.
Yes.
It's a really big part of the process of grieving is to actually allow people to help you.
Yes.
You know, like not to see it as a weakness that someone else is going to hold space for you. Like breathe into that as well. You know, like let others help you, you know, because that can be
definitely
a big
challenge.
Yeah.
I said thank you and sorry and so much, you know, and it's probably not necessary. It's probably, oh, I'm so sorry, or thank you so much, or, you know, I did a lot of, you know, not really knowing how to accept. And, you know, it's fine to say thank you, but and just say, you know, thank you, I'm really grateful for what you've done, and leave it at that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I guess I was talking about this with a friend the other day who'd also lost her son, and she's like, oh, I've got this. It was a year and a half ago, and she said, I've got this. I said, what are you doing today? She goes, I've had this Tupperware dish that someone gave me food in, and I didn't know whose it was. I got so much food in Tupperware that I didn't know whose was whose, and this person's kept asking me for it, and she said, and I finally found it, and I finally got it in the car, and I'm about to deliver it. So can I ask that when you give completely?
yeah. Oh my gosh, because when you're in the middle of grief, that can be such a pressure and a trauma over the top of it, you know, like if you're giving.
I know it sounds silly.
It does. But yeah, absolutely. But I totally, you know, if you're going to give the friggin' Tupperware container as well.
Don't ask for it back. Yeah, I know.
Because it's too overwhelming, right?
It is. It's so overwhelming. It's just
because you're still trying to be the good girl and still being part of society, and that's just the struggle as well. As you know, you're supposed to be doing this, and this, as well as I'm trying to grieve and I'm trying to process all that information that's just happened to me, and you're in shock. And
that's so true. That's so true. It clouds so much of your brain, and all those processes that used to come quite naturally to you before. That's probably something really important to recognize, is that brain fog. You know, that physical brain fog. Like I meant, you know, there's a schedule here that I'm used to following, and there's this protocols that, you know,
and it all looks like a muddle.
It does, and I want to be a good friend, but I actually don't know how to be a friend right now. So and I think you've got to forgive yourself for those things as well, and the people around you need to recognize that's, you know, it's an impairment on so many levels. And I still say to people, look, you know, I'm so sorry, you know, this is where I'm at. I can't do this today. I have to know, because I just can't. I'm getting better. It's definitely a programming thing that I'm trying to unprogram myself.
And so Rachel, you said you're a journalist. What field are you working in? Like, do you work with people that have got grief? Like, if people are on here and have challenge, to start with, how can they grab your book is the very first thing.
Yes, it's available on any website, Booktopia, Amazon. If you just put in Rachel Noble or Finn's Feather, it'll come up.
Would you mind actually putting the link into so people can just click on it? That would be great.
Problem. Yeah, that's fine. My work is very varied at the moment. I do grief work when I'm asked. I write picture books at the moment. I'm promoting my new picture book, Marty. I have 4 children, and my husband has a medical practice, so I assist with that as well. So I don't work as a journalist as such anymore. I do write, but and I think one of my long-term goals is to write a book about grief. I did write a memoir for Hamish about 3 months after he passed away. I think it was more therapy for me, though. I think a few publishers read it, and I think it was a bit too much. You know, that pain was really visceral at that point. Very raw, very difficult to read, I think. Now, you know, 8.5, 9 years down the track, I think I would write a different book. So that's definitely something that I would like to do in the future. But with me, you know, it's just little bits at a time. it's just, I've got a lot going on my plate. So I just do what I can when I can. And then I trust that when the time is right, that the work will come to me and I will hopefully.
So if anyone's watching and would like to reach out, you're comfortable with that? You're okay
absolutely.
with that? Yeah. And so maybe even if someone wants to reach out, they can put your details in, friend you on Facebook, whatever works.
Yes, I'll put my website in the there's a contact me form on my website. So anyone who wants to chat, definitely contact me through that too as well, or Facebook, whatever medium, Instagram as well. I'm there as well. So anywhere that people feel comfortable, platform they feel comfortable using.
And with your book, I just thought, like, my kids are now 25 and 27. I had to think about that. But, we've still got some amazing books from their childhood that we're holding on to for grandchildren and all that sort of stuff. Would you say your book is something that, without me reading it myself, is it that, I haven't read it yet. Is your book something that you can have in the library and support a child that hasn't gone through grief yet, but to understand it?
Yes.
Or is it for someone that is a child that is going through grief? Is it something that you can have, for them to understand?
Yeah, so basically, I think Finn's, what I'd love to tell you about Finn's Feather is it's a book about a little boy who's lost his brother. And basically there's also a friend involved who kind of meets Finn where he is, who comes to him. So it's very much a book about grief, but it's also just as much, I believe, a book about empathy. It's a book about resilience, how to be a friend to someone who's going through something hard. And in this case, Finn's friend Lucas just comes to him as a friend and says, you found a feather, what are we going to do with it? What do you want to do with it? Because he kind of believes that it's been sent by his brother. And Lucas says to him, well, do you want to hold it close? What do you want to do with it? And eventually they suggest that Finn suggests that maybe he'd like to play with it, and that's his friend's like, great, let's play. And so the feather then becomes an object of memory, but then it becomes an object of play,
creativity
between the two. Between the two of them, this connection, this concept of meeting someone where they are, and then at the very end, he's like, the feather's no longer white, it's kind of a bit bedraggled, it's been used to tickle, it's been used to do all these other things. And then Finn decides the best place for this feather now is to go to his mum. So at the very end of the book, he hands it to his mum. So for me, it is a book for any child who can go, actually, I know a friend who's going through something hard, and maybe I can be a friend to them. So I hope that kind of helps.
That's why I wanted to ask that question, because if it's okay with you, I'd love to finish off with something that I went through with my kids. There's a book that I got from Neil Donald Walsh. I don't know if you've ever heard.
Yes, I have read Conversations with God.
Conversations with God. Well, he's got a book called The Little Soul in the Sun. It's a kid's book.
Right, I did not know that.
It's an amazing book, and the story is, I tell my clients this story because it's such a innocent way of experiencing life, right? So the story goes, the little soul comes up to God and says, God, I've worked out who I am. And God says, oh, that's really cool, So he goes away and he comes back and he says, God, now that I know who I am, I want to go back down and experience who I am. So God says, okay, so what part of who you are do you want to experience? So they go through all these attributes and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, I want to experience myself as forgiving. And God says, okay, so what, who is there to forgive? So this friendly soul comes along and she says, we have been together so many times and I love you so much and I know you love me that I'm prepared to come down with you and I'm going to forget who I am so that I do something really nasty to you so that you can experience yourself as forgiving. but you've got to promise me that you remember who you are and forgive me, because if you forget, then we both have forgotten, and we're going to have someone else come to remind us who we are, right? So that's basically the gist of the story, and it's really beautifully illustrated and blah, blah, blah. My kids and I read that on a regular basis. It was a beautiful thing. So when night happened, my kids are little, they're watching TV. I think they were watching Humphrey Bee Bear or something on TV. And they come in, Mum, there's planes crashing, blah, blah, blah. And I had my brother and his friend staying, and they went into chaos. So everyone's in chaos, you know, like freaking out, blah, blah, blah. 3 days later, my daughter comes to me and says to me, Mum, like she starts crying, what's going on? Why did those men do that? Blah, 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 blah. And I said to her, Carly, do you remember the little soul Sun? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, those guys in that plane are the friendly soul. And she goes, oh, we just have to forgive them. And I said, yeah. And she said, oh, I can do that. Bang, changed, whole world changed, flipped through it, no worries, no issues with forgiving now in her life ever. Like she's like, it's just, you know, so these stories are so powerful, and that's why I wanted to ask you that, you know, like everyone that's got kids, bring, and grandchildren and friends' kids, you know, go on and jump on and grab that book. So it's there as a tool for, you know, emotionally balancing our children and showing them how to function in a world that's so chaotic.
Absolutely. And yeah. I did a small tour in the US with this book for the publisher. And it's interesting to me, there was a few parents who came along to some of my book readings who weren't aware of the story, who weren't aware of the theme, and who were quite taken aback by it. It was sort of a bit like, oh,
what are we doing here?
I was not prepared for the emotional side of this book and, you know, the impact on my child. But I do hope that they went home and were kind of like, well, maybe this is something we should talk to our kids about. Maybe we shouldn't try and shield them from this stuff. Perhaps we should give them the tools to cope, because we never know at any point when things will change for us, or when we're exposed to those really hard things as adults and children, and to be aware, and not just go, okay, this is too much, this is too hard, this pain is too much. And I know that there are adults who treated me like that after Hamish. It was like, couldn't even look at me because they knew that the pain was horrific. And it was too much for them. And I get that. I get that you don't want to have to go there if you don't have to. At the same point, I think if we're going to be wholehearted, resilient, empathetic human beings, we kind of need to
go down those dark paths sometimes. Yeah, absolutely.
We need to train our kids to be those kind of adults too.
That's right. Absolutely. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, Rachel.
Thanks.
I really enjoyed
it too. I hope that it has been helpful, and I hope it wasn't as, I guess, you know, as dark or heavy as you thought it might be.
No, well, as I said at the start, it was like, you know, I opened up, I had a look and went, oh, okay, this is what we're talking about, you know, like maybe it was a lesson for me to look a little bit further than the morning before. You know?
I do that plenty times too. So
but you know, I've had people on here. We've talked about sex. We've talked about you know, crazy stuff. You know, and it's the real raw reality of life, and that's what Women of Light are all about, right?
Exactly right.
Is being able to look at these things and to work through them. So. Yes. I want to be able to be of service to, and you know, obviously are the same, you know, that heart-centered, being able to be here to share, you know, and to allow other women on here to be able to do the same. So,
yes, 100%. Yes.
So thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed the whole process, the whole conversation.
I really enjoyed being here. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah. Take care.
I will.
Love to everyone that's watching. And if you've got any questions for Rachel, by all means, just tag her in the post and Rachel will get back to you.
I will.
In that process. But definitely anyone that I'm going to be buying the book. So if anyone's got any kids, I've got nephews and a niece in my family. So I'll be buying the book so that it's in the family.
Thank you. Thank you,
Elizabeth. And yeah, I highly recommend that everybody do that so that there's, you know, these things need to be talked about. So
they do.
Take care, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Elizabeth.
See ya.